Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Ernie Ostick. I'm a product specialist at IBM. I've spent my entire career in the area of data integration, and in the last 10 years or so, specifically with issues surrounding metadata management and information governance. Thanks for joining me on this recording. It is the first in a series of videos on Apache Atlas, the open source initiative for metadata management and governance for Hadoop. I started recording this series in an effort to assist my colleagues and customers and partners who want and need to gain familiarity with Apache Atlas, but don't have the resources or the time to do their own project builds, or lack the familiarity with setting up some of the finer points of their VMware images. So we're going to take a look at that, and also look and point out some of the other valuable resources on the web where you can find additional information on this important initiative. I'm not an expert on Apache Atlas, nor an authority. I'm just sharing my experiences and observations. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so if we're going to get started, first thing we have to do is go out and download an image that's going to allow us to have access to Apache Atlas. So let's first go out to the Hortonworks website. Hortonworks is the Hadoop vendor and primary sponsor and driver, at least initially, behind Apache Atlas. And they've done an excellent job of creating sets of resources at their website, and also providing some initial tutorials for Apache Atlas to get you started. Existing VMware image where some metadata already exists, and the Apache Atlas server and environment is already set up. So it takes away some of that initial burden that you might have to do if you're going to do this entirely on your own. Let's just go to their search, and it might be off the page, but there's a search button there. This will take you to some of their base Atlas resources. So we'll go down to their detailed Apache Atlas page, and you can see here they have a lot of nice resources. Explains what it does, how Atlas works, and details which we're going to get into for the tutorials. Right, but for now we want to get to what they call a technical preview, and this hyperlink here that shows where you can download it. So this is what you're initially going to do. This is a preview of what they call Atlas with Ranger. Ranger is a security initiative that works very closely with Atlas, and we'll talk about that in a future recording. But for right now, we just want to go get the image. So if you already know how to do all of this, you know, maybe this isn't what you need to be listening to, but my goal here is for those of you that need to play with Atlas and aren't really comfortable with setting up these environments, that you'll have some guidance. So this is going to bring down a OVA file for VMware Workstation. So we're just going to go ahead and save it. And I'm just going to drop it here onto my C drive. You can put it anywhere that you really want to. It depends, it's up to you. But in the end, you're going to save it somewhere where you can keep it. And then we're going to go ahead and open it up with VMware Workstation. Alright, we are now in VMware Workstation. I happen to be using VMware Workstation 11.1. I do have a fully licensed copy for VMware Workstation. I have to check and see if the VMware Player would work as well. I'll have to take that as an action item, but everything works pretty successfully in Workstation 11. The download that we started earlier from the Hortonworks site, I don't know, I've done it lots of times. It probably takes anywhere between 8 and 15 minutes depending upon the network that I'm on. But once you have it all successfully downloaded, that OVA file, we are going to be in VMware Workstation. We're going to go ahead and find that OVA file. So I think we downloaded it into this temp directory for now. And just click on it within VMware Workstation. It's going to say it wants to import the virtual machine. It has a name for it already that was given to it by the folks at Hortonworks. And you're going to put it somewhere. So wherever it is you decide to lay it down is where it's going to expand the OVA file into all the different parts and pieces that are needed for a normal VMware image. So we click on import, and this process also takes anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes in scenarios that I have. It always gives me this warning. I haven't had a chance to look into it in detail, but I think it just has something to do with hardware conflicts. But I've seen it lots of times before with VMware. So you can just say retry, and that's it. It's going to go ahead and do the import. Again, this could take anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes depending upon your machine and the disk that you're using. So let's go ahead and let that expand, and we will come back when it is completed. When the download is complete, there should already be a tab that's opened up here in VMware Workstation, but just in case that there isn't, you're going to come down and do File Open, and you're going to go to the location where you finally placed that expanded information. And I actually have mine in a subdirectory that I actually called Hortonworks Atlas Ranger, where I ended up expanding the OVA file. But what you're looking for is this .vmx file that is going to contain the setup information and drive your image. So this is actually the tab that will appear automatically if you do this all in one session, but if necessary you can do that open that I just showed you. So at this point everything's pretty well set up for VM Workstation to know what to do. So you're going to say power on this virtual machine, and you can just ignore this initial warning, virtual device, just say yes, and it's going to start launching the Linux environment startup for the image. Once again, this is going to take a little time, so go out and get yourself a cup of coffee. I'm going to take a little break here myself, and we will come back once it has fully started. Alright, we're back. Got my coffee refreshed, and we're ready to go and log into this Unix environment. So just to give you some background on this environment that I'm running, I have a fairly beefy machine. It's a Lenovo W541 with 8 cores and 16 gigabytes of memory. So it runs pretty fast. I get decent performance out of it for this kind of work. We're going to go ahead and log in. So the password, or the user ID and password information that's out at the Hortonworks site is root, and the password is Hadoop. Oh, that was nice, typed it in wrong. Root, Hadoop, let's try that again. And here we are at the command line. when you're running these exercises, the expectation is that you're going to connect to the Atlas environment from a browser that's running outside of the VMware image. In my case, it's going to be running on Windows. So let's see what we have for a IP address. And we don't really have one. It's all internal. So in doing some research on this and going through some of the threads at the forums that are out at the Hortonworks site for Atlas, there were some contributors there who have more network experience and depth than I have. And I'm going to follow their guidance. They said to issue a DH client-R, which I believe releases the current network connection information, and then DH client again, which reestablishes it through DHCP and gives us a new IP address. And of course, that's the IP address that we're going to need. Do another ifconfig. That's the IP address that we're going to need in order to connect from my browser. So 192.168.62.139. That'll be the IP address that we're going to use to connect to Mbari and ultimately to Atlas. I also need to get the exercises and labs tutorials, excuse me, to all work correctly. I also need to start up MySQL. So let's do that. And there it says OK. And so I now have configured an IP address that I can use externally and gotten things started. So I can now go ahead and log into the environment. Restarting or bringing back up my browser, I am still again at the Apache Atlas page. And I probably should note that in the previous section, I needed to start MySQL as there is a very good lab in the tutorials provided at this page that illustrates how we can take data from a external to Hadoop MySQL structure and bring it into Hadoop using Scoop. But more importantly, for this particular lab that's described on these pages, illustrate how that activity is tracked by Atlas. So we're actually going to see lineage. And that's one of the tutorials that you want to go through. For some reason, MySQL wasn't starting for me, and so I needed to do it manually, which is why I had that step there for you. But to this page, you really need to spend time here. I encourage you to read through the different links, check out the resources, spend some time in the forum and discussion and chats. There are a lot of resources on the web. This is certainly one of the core resources for Atlas, and we all need to increase our understanding and education of Atlas and help move this initiative forward. So now that we're here, let's go ahead and use our browser session here to connect into Atlas or into this Hadoop environment, ensure that everything is working and ready so that you can go forward and get your way through the tutorials and start your learning curve. Alright, so let's sign in here. We'll first go into Mbari. 192.168.62.139 I think it was, and the default port from Mbari is 8080. So if this is correct, it brings in the login screen. So it's admin. We'll sign in, and it's loading up Mbari. And our video here is not going to talk in detail about Mbari. There's lots of other resources on the web for that. Of course, what we're interested in here today is Atlas, of course. So of course, here's your old dashboard from Mbari. Atlas we see is running. Of course, that's the most critical thing for what we're doing here. The tutorial will take you through other parts of MBARI if you haven't seen it, so you can look at some tables and some other things and do some SQL. But of course, like I said, we're just worried about Atlas here and make sure everything is running correctly so you can get through the tutorials successfully. So let's open up a new tab now and let's go check out Atlas. Let's see, 192.168.62.139, and the Atlas port number is default 21000. And this brings up Atlas. So this is how the Atlas environment was configured in this image by the folks at Hortonworks. It has some tags and it has some metadata in it already. And we'll just, for fun here, these will be some things that you're going to learn about, but we'll put in one of the Atlas types and just see if we can get a response back. It's thinking about it, and so these are some of the tables that are already known to Atlas for the Hive environment. So the Hive tables are there, and of course there's many other types, and we'll explore those in some of the future recordings when we take a look at the REST API that's available for Atlas. What's interesting here, and let me just slide over, is let's take a look at what release we have. And while they're currently working on other releases within the project, which is in incubator status, this particular image has a 0.6 release. And as I said before, get involved. I won't belabor that point anymore, but certainly that's important for all of us to consider as Atlas is gaining momentum. Well, let's now also just check out the Ranger environment, which I said earlier was the security initiative that is very nicely integrated with Atlas, and it is in fact what one of your first labs tutorials is going to be when you're shown how it works closely with Atlas. So let's go see how Ranger looks. And Ranger is at the same location, except it is 6080 if I remember correctly as a port. So let's see if it loads up successfully. Gives us the login. Come on. And there it is. Took a while. Oops. It's getting late. So admin again is the password, and if this comes up successfully, you'll see the GUI looks something like this, and that user interface will allow you to go through that first tutorial. So here's what Atlas looks like. You now have enough to ensure that the environment is working correctly. As I said before, I encourage you to go through those tutorials and get started on your learning curve. So that's all there is to it. Go ahead and do your download, import and start your VMware image, and get into Atlas for the first time so you can start playing, doing the tutorials, and start gaining familiarity with this new initiative for metadata management in Hadoop. Good luck, and thanks for joining.